The chamber was larger than anything humanity had ever constructed. 3 miles of curved walls rose toward a domed ceiling that displayed the swirling cosmos itself. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood at the center of it all, in a circular platform that floated above a gravity well designed to make lesser species feel small and insignificant. Above him, arranged in concentric rings that climbed toward the distant ceiling, sat representatives from 847 different species. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Still others existed as pure energy contained in specialized housings. Translation matrices hummed constantly, converting thousands of languages into something each species could understand. Marcus kept his hands clasped behind his back and his face calm. Around him, the assembled powers of the galaxy were laughing. The sound was unlike anything heard on Earth. Clicks and whistles mixed with deep rumbling sounds and high-pitched trills. Some species flashed colors across their skin. Others vibrated their carapaces. But the meaning was universal. They found humanity amusing. The High Magistrate of the Valdaran Council leaned forward from his position at the highest point of the chamber. His species resembled nothing so much as a massive jellyfish, tendrils floating in a specialized gravity field. When he spoke, his voice boomed through every translation device in the room. "Let me ensure I understand the situation correctly," the magistrate said. "Your species, which has been part of the galactic community for a mere 70 years, is threatening war against the Korvath Empire, an empire that has existed for 12,000 years. Over 3 asteroids, uninhabited asteroids." More laughter rippled through the chamber. Marcus waited for it to die down. "The Korvath arrived in that system first," Marcus said quietly. His voice carried perfectly through the acoustic design of the chamber. "They established mining operations. Showed them our territorial survey from 6 months prior. They ignored it." A crystalline being rose from one of the lower rings. This was Thix, the Korvath ambassador. Light refracted through his body in sharp angles. "The survey was conducted with primitive equipment. Our sensors detected no valid claim markers. The system belongs to the Korvath Empire by right of superior presence." "And yet, the initial survey data was filed with the Galactic Registry," Marcus replied. "According to Council law, that constitutes a valid claim." The magistrate's tendrils curled in what might have been amusement. "Human ambassador, do you truly believe your species can enforce such a claim through military action? Your ships barely achieve faster than light travel. Your weapons are based on kinetic energy and primitive fusion devices. The Korvath fleet could sterilize your homeworld before your defense forces could mount a response." He simply stared up at the magistrate with those calm, dark eyes. A new species spoke up from the mid-levels. The Dreth representative, a being composed of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. "I find this situation fascinating. Humans are the only species in recorded history who arrived at the galactic community actively afraid of themselves. They have entire organizations dedicated to preventing war among their own kind. They apologize for their violent history. They beg us to help them remain peaceful." Laughter again, louder this time. "And yet here they stand," the Dreth continued, "threatening violence over mining rights. How wonderfully contradictory." Vex raised several of his appendages in a gesture of dismissal. "The human delegation has 48 hours to surrender all claims to the disputed asteroids. If they refuse, the Korvath fleet will demonstrate. Why elder species do not negotiate with children playing at politics." The laughter reached a crescendo. Species that had never agreed on anything found common ground in their amusement at human pretensions. Here was a species barely capable of reaching their own moon 200 years ago, now acting as if they could stand against empires that had ruled the stars since before human civilization existed. Marcus waited. He had learned patience in his years of diplomatic service. He had learned to read rooms, even rooms filled with beings whose psychology was utterly alien to human understanding, and he could feel the moment coming. The moment when their confidence would peak, when they would be most vulnerable to a truth they did not expect. "I have a question," Marcus said softly. The magistrate gestured for silence. The laughter died away. "Speak, human. In the 70 years since first contact, has anyone on this Council ever wondered why Earth maintained its complete military-industrial complex? Why we never decommissioned our warships? Why our weapons factories continued operation? Why every human colony has strategic command bunkers built into its foundations? The chamber grew quiet. Not the attentive quiet of interest, but the uncomfortable quiet of a gathering that suddenly realized they had missed something obvious. "You thought we were afraid of ourselves?" Marcus continued. His voice remained calm, but something in his tone had changed. "You thought we built all those peace organizations and conflict resolution frameworks because we feared our own violent nature? You thought we were naive children playing at civilization?" He turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. "We are afraid. You are correct about that, but not of ourselves. We are afraid of what we might have to become again if someone forces our hand. We have spent 70 years praying that the galaxy would be different from what we expected, that we could finally put down the burden we have carried for 400 years. Vic's crystalline structure flickered with irritation. Dramatic words from a species whose greatest warship would be considered a patrol craft by Korvath standards. "The greatest warship you have seen," Marcus corrected gently. "The greatest warship we chose to show you." The magistrate's tendrils stilled. "Explain. You have seen our civilian technology, our entertainment, our culture, our commercial vessels. You have seen what we thought would keep us safe, what we hoped would be enough." Marcus's expression did not change, but his eyes grew harder. "You have not seen what we keep in reserve, what we built shelters against in every colony, what we pray we never have to use again." Before anyone could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the chamber. Not a human alarm. Korvath one. Vex received a transmission, his body flickering rapidly as data flowed through his crystalline structure. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its mocking tone. "The Korvath demonstration fleet has engaged human forces at the disputed mining site. Our ships report, they report." He fell silent. "They report what?" the magistrate demanded. Vex turned to face Marcus. "Our entire fleet is disabled. Life support only. They are dead in space. Not a single Korvath casualty. Not one. The human ships appeared from nowhere, bypassed our shields simultaneously across 17 vessels, and shut down every system except life support. Then they withdrew." The chamber erupted in chaos. Species shouted questions in languages that translation matrices struggled to parse. But Marcus simply stood in his gravity well, calm as still water, waited for the galaxy to understand what Earth had been trying to tell them. War was not something humans were bad at. It was something they had become too good at. And that was why they feared it most of all. The emergency council session convened 6 hours after the incident. The chamber that had been filled with laughter now hummed with tension. Ambassador Vex stood where Marcus had stood the day before, his crystalline body dim with what might have been shame or shock. "Explain what happened," the magistrate commanded. Vex's internal light pulsed irregularly. The demonstration fleet consisted of 17 warships, including 3 heavy cruisers. We detected the human mining outpost and prepared to disable its shields as a show of force. Standard intimidation protocols. We expected them to surrender immediately upon seeing our fleet. But they did not surrender, prompted the magistrate. They evacuated. The entire outpost was empty when we arrived. We thought they had fled in fear. Then our sensors detected 6 human vessels approaching. Only 6, against 17. Vex paused. We did not understand how they had appeared so suddenly. One moment our long-range sensors showed nothing. The next moment, they were simply there, in formation around our fleet. A Dreth Council member leaned forward. "Our shields should have detected the gravity fluctuations of their approach. That is what we thought. But these ships used a different kind of drive system. They did not create the standard ripples in space-time that our sensors are designed to detect. They seemed to fold space around themselves, compressing the distance rather than moving through it. Our entire defense grid was calibrated for conventional faster-than-light signatures." Marcus stood in the observer section, listening. Beside him stood Admiral Patricia Kane, commander of the human defense fleet that had engaged the Korvath. She was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe style and eyes that had seen more than most beings in the galaxy would ever witness. Continue your report, the magistrate said to Vex. The human vessels took up positions around our fleet. Perfect positions. Each one covered multiple approach vectors. Analyzed their formation and found no weaknesses. Whoever commanded those ships understood three-dimensional combat at a level we had not expected. Did they fire? Asked a voice from the upper rings. No, they sent a message. Admiral Kane stated that we had 12 hours to withdraw our fleet from the disputed region. She called it our only warning. Vix's light flickered. We interpreted this as human naivety. We believe they did not understand the power imbalance, so we prepared to demonstrate that power. The chamber waited, never got the chance. Every ship in our fleet experienced simultaneous shield failure, not damage. The shields did not collapse from overload or weapons fire. They simply deactivated. Then our weapon systems went offline, then engines, then navigation. Within 90 seconds, 17 Corvath warships were floating in space with nothing but emergency life support. A murmur ran through the assembled species. This was unprecedented. Shields did not simply fail across multiple ships simultaneously unless hit by weapons specifically designed for that purpose, and even then, it took time, minutes at least. Not seconds? Did the humans destroy your fleet? The magistrate asked. No. Vex's voice carried something that sounded like confusion. They boarded every ship, but not with soldiers, it's medical teams and engineers. They repaired our life support systems to full capacity. They left emergency supplies. Food, water, medical equipment. Then they withdrew. Not a single Corvath died. Not one was even injured. Marcus watched the council process this information. He could see the calculations happening behind alien eyes. The recalibration of assumptions, the slow dawn of understanding that humanity was not what they had believed. The magistrate turned to face the human delegation. Ambassador Webb, you will explain your fleet's capabilities. Now. Marcus stood and walked to the central platform. Kane followed him. Together they descended into the gravity well that was meant to make them feel small. What would you like to know? Marcus asked calmly. Everything. Your drive systems, your weapons, your cyber warfare capabilities. How a species that barely achieved faster than light travels 70 years ago has technology that can disable a Corvath fleet in 90 seconds. Kane spoke for the first time. Her voice was level and professional. With respect, Magistrate, you are asking about classified military technology. We cannot simply share that information with the entire council.
You threatened war,
Dex said sharply. You disabled our fleet. And now you refuse to explain how you did it. We disabled your fleet without casualties, Kane replied. We could have destroyed every ship. We chose not to. That choice should tell you something about our intentions. It tells us you are more dangerous than we realized, said the Dreth representative. Yes, Marcus agreed simply. We are. That is what we have been trying to tell you. The magistrate's tendrils curled and uncurled in agitation. Ships travel 8,000 light-years in the time they did. The Corvath fleet took 3 months to make that journey. Your ships were there in days. Marcus glanced at Kane. She nodded slightly. Our faster-than-light technology is based on gravity manipulation rather than space-time expansion. We compress the distance ahead of us and expand the distance behind us. The effect is similar to pulling yourself along a rope rather than walking down a path. It is more energy-intensive but much faster. Impossible, stated a species from the upper rings. The energy requirements would be astronomical. You would need a power source equivalent to a small star. We have one, Kane said quietly. In every ship larger than a corvette, we call them microfusion reactors. They generate sustained fusion reactions in a space no larger than a cargo container. The chamber fell silent. Every species present understood the implications. Fusion reactors of that efficiency represented a technological leap that should have taken centuries to achieve. What else have you hidden from us? The magistrate demanded. Marcus took a breath. Would you like to know about our weapons, Magistrate? The ones we developed 400 years ago? The ones we built defensive shelters against because we were afraid we would use them on ourselves. Before anyone could answer, a new presence made itself known in the chamber. A section of the wall that had appeared solid suddenly revealed itself to be a specialized observation port. Behind it, visible now for the first time, sat a being that made even the magistrate seem small. The Hive Collective had not spoken in council chambers for over 1,000 years. They were among the oldest species in the known galaxy, and they observed more than they participated. Their form was difficult for human eyes to process. A constantly shifting mass of interconnected neural nodes that shared consciousness across light years. When the Hive spoke, every being in the chamber felt it as much as heard it. The humans are afraid of war because they perfected it. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. We have watched this species since first contact. We have studied their history through the data they freely shared. We have seen what they did to themselves before they reached the stars. They did not simply fight wars. They industrialized them. They turned entire planetary economies into machines designed for a single purpose: the complete destruction of their enemies. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. This was not how he had wanted this conversation to go. They developed mathematics for killing, the Hive continued, strategies for ending civilizations, logistics for moving destruction across continents. They got so efficient at it, so terrifyingly good at it, that they scared themselves into peace. They built weapons capable of destroying their entire biosphere, and then chose not to use them. The Hive's presence seemed to fill the chamber. That is what stands before you, not a weak species playing its strength, but a strong species that chose to appear weak because the alternative terrified them more than any external threat ever could. Dix's crystalline structure had gone completely dark. Hey, what have we done? Marcus opened his eyes and looked up at the assembled council. You laughed at us for fearing war. You thought it was weakness? You did not understand that some fears are wisdom. We joined your galaxy hoping we could leave that part of ourselves behind. We could finally be something other than what we were bred to be through millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of increasingly destructive warfare. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. The Korvath fleet is intact because we chose mercy, because we are still trying to be the species we want to be, rather than the species we know how to be. But if the galaxy decides to test us further, if more fleets come to Earth seeking to prove their dominance, then eventually we will have to stop choosing mercy. The chamber remained silent. As when that happens, Marcus concluded quietly. You will understand why we spent 70 years begging you not to make us remember what we are. The magistrate made his decision quickly. Too much had been revealed, too much remained hidden. The council needed to understand exactly what humanity was capable of before making any judgments about the territorial dispute or any other matter involving Earth. Ambassador Webb, the magistrate announced, the council formally requests access to Earth's complete military historical archives. We must understand what we are dealing with. Marcus had expected this. He had prepared for it. But that did not make it easier. I will agree on one condition. The archives will be reviewed only by yourself and a select security committee, not the full council. Some of what you will see, he paused, searching for words. Some of it should not be widely distributed. For the safety of the galaxy, the request was granted. 3 days later, Marcus stood in a secured conference room deep within the council station. With him was Dr. Rebecca Stone, a human historian who specialized in military conflicts. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a gentle voice that belied the terrible knowledge she carried. The magistrate floated at one end of the room. Beside him were representatives from 5 species chosen for their strategic understanding and diplomatic discretion. Among them was Thex, still dulled from his fleet's humiliation, present because he needed to understand what his people had nearly awakened. Before we begin, Rebecca said, I want to be clear about what you are about to see. This is not propaganda. This is not exaggeration. These are historical records of what humanity did to itself over the course of approximately 10,000 years of recorded warfare. She activated the holographic display. The first images showed primitive humans with stone weapons. We've been at war since before we developed agriculture. Conflict is woven into our evolutionary history. For most of our existence, wars were small. A village against a village. A tribe against a tribe. Images shifted. Bronze weapons, iron swords, cavalry charges. But as we developed technology, our wars grew. We learned organization, we learned logistics, we learned that victory was not about individual courage but about systems, supply lines, command structures, the ability to coordinate thousands of individuals toward a single goal. The holographic display showed Roman legions marching in perfect formation, medieval sieges that lasted years, naval battles involving hundreds of ships, and then we reached a turning point. The images changed to something more recent. Trenches, artillery, poison gas. Out! The representatives leaned forward, unable to look away from the horror unfolding before them. This was our First World War. We industrialized killing. Factories produced weapons. Trains moved millions of soldiers to the front lines. We developed chemical weapons and used them. Nearly 20 million died. The Dreth representative made a sound of distress. 20 million? One war? In 4 years, Rebecca corrected quietly. And we learned from it. We studied it. We analyzed what worked and what did not. Then, barely 20 years later, we did it again. Bigger. The Second World War played out in the holographic field. Bombers darkening the sky. Tank columns stretching to the horizon. Cities burning. And then the moment that changed everything, 2 massive explosions that turned cities into ash. Atomic weapons. We split the atom and turned it into a bomb. These 2 devices killed over 200,000 people in seconds. And we realized we had created something that could end our species. The magistrate's tendrils had gone rigid. You used weapons of mass extinction on yourselves, twice, to end a war that had already killed 70 million people. Rebecca's voice remained steady, professional, but Marcus could see the pain in her eyes. Every human alive carried the weight of this history. And then we built more, bigger ones. We created missiles that could cross continents in minutes. We put enough nuclear weapons in silos and submarines to destroy every city on Earth 20 times over. The display showed a map of Earth covered in target markers, red lines indicating missile trajectories, estimated casualty counts running into the billions. This was called the Cold War. 2 powers aimed extinction at each other for 40 years. We came within minutes of ending ourselves. Several times, only luck and a few key individuals making the right choice in the moment prevented total nuclear war. They spoke for the first time. How did you survive? How did any of you survive? We developed something called mutually assured destruction. If anyone launched their weapons, everyone would die. The knowledge that there was no victory, only death, kept us from pulling the trigger. Rebecca switched to a different set of images, but we kept developing. Biological weapons, chemical weapons, kinetic weapons that could drop tungsten rods from orbit with the force of nuclear, bombs, but without the radiation. Watched in growing horror as Rebecca detailed weapons designed to destroy water supplies, spread engineered diseases, disrupt communications across entire continents. And the worst part, Rebecca continued, is that we got good at the strategy. We developed game theory. We created computers to run millions of simulations. We learned how to coordinate global logistics, how to move supplies across hostile territory, how to fight on every terrain from deserts to oceans to eventually space itself. She brought up footage of military exercises, ships, aircraft, ground forces, and orbital platforms all moving in perfect synchronization. Every human child learns basic strategic thinking in school, organization, efficiency, resource, management, adaptability. We teach it as mathematics, as logistics, as systems thinking, but it all came from war. We are a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of destroying ourselves. The magistrate finally spoke. Then how? How did you stop? Marcus stepped forward. We scared ourselves. We looked at what we had become and decided it had to end. We created global organizations dedicated to preventing war. We established rules. We built frameworks for conflict resolution. We turned our military research toward defense and exploration rather than conquest. But we never forgot, Rebecca added. We never dismantled the knowledge. We could not. It is part of our history, our culture, our collective memory. We just chose not to use it. She brought up one final image. Modern Earth, viewed from orbit. Beautiful blue and green, peaceful. We have been at peace with ourselves for nearly 400 years. It is our greatest achievement. But that peace is maintained by the memory of what war cost us, and the knowledge that we could do it all again if we chose to. The room fell silent. The security committee members were processing what they had seen. Some looked ill. Others looked thoughtful. Vex had gone completely transparent, a sign of deep shock in his species. There is something you need to understand, Marcus said into the quiet. When we joined the galactic community, we studied your wars. Every major conflict in the last 1,000 years of recorded history, we ran simulations. We analyzed tactics. We looked for patterns. He paused, letting them absorb this. You fight with honor. You follow rules of engagement. You have limited objectives. You stop when you achieve your goals or when casualties reach certain thresholds. Your wars are rational, controlled, purposeful. Yours are not. The magistrate asked. Ours were not. When humans fought wars, we fought total wars. We mobilized everything. We held nothing back. We did not stop until our enemy had no capacity to resist. And even then, we had to consciously choose mercy because our instinct was to continue until the threat was completely eliminated, Rebecca added. We have been members of the galactic community for 70 years. In that time, we have simulated conflict scenarios against every major power. Different situations, different objectives, different force compositions. She met the magistrate's gaze directly. We have never lost a single simulation. Not against the Korvath, not against the Dreth, not against anyone, because we approach warfare differently than you do. We do not fight to achieve limited objectives. We fight to win absolutely. And we are very, very good at it. The magistrate's tendrils trembled. Why are you telling us this? Why reveal your capabilities? Because you need to understand what you almost awakened, Marcus said. The Korvath fleet attacked our mining outpost. They intended a demonstration, not a massacre, so we responded proportionally. We disabled their ships without casualties. But if they had killed anyone, if they had actually attacked Earth or a colony with lethal intent, the response would have been different. How different? Vex asked quietly. The Korvath Empire spans 40 systems. We have contingency plans for neutralizing all of them within a 72-hour period. Not destroying them, not killing anyone, but taking every military and governmental facility offline, disabling every ship, shutting down every communications network. We could decapitate an entire interstellar empire in 3 days. The room erupted in protests and questions, but Marcus raised his hand for silence. We do not want to do this. We do not want to be the species that does this. We came to the stars hoping we could finally put down that burden, that we could be explorers, traders, friends, that we could learn from species that had found better ways to resolve conflicts. He looked around at the assembled representatives. But the galaxy laughed at us, called us weak, tested us. And now we must ask, will you help us remain the species we want to be? Or will you force us to become what we used to be? The question hung in the air like a blade. Outside the secured room, unknown to the humans or the council, 3 species had already made their choice. The Korvath humiliated and angry. The Vryn Dominion, hungry for the technology humanity possessed. And the Teskar Concordat, who saw opportunity in chaos. They were already gathering their fleets, already planning an assault on Earth itself. They believed that humanity's restraint was weakness, that their cyber weapons were a trick that could be defended against, that if they struck hard enough and fast enough, they could take Earth before the Council could intervene. They were about to learn the difference between humans choosing peace and humans unable to fight. The galaxy was about to see what humanity looked like when they stopped asking permission to defend themselves. The Deep Space Monitoring Station at the edge of human territory detected them first. 3 fleets, moving in coordinated formation toward the solar system. Over 3,000 warships representing 3 different species, all converging on a single point. Earth Lieutenant James Morrison watched the sensor displays with growing dread. He had served in the monitoring corps for 12 years, and he had never seen anything like this. The scale was unprecedented. This was not a demonstration. This was an invasion. "Get me Admiral Kane," he said to his communications officer. "Priority 1. Inactivate the emergency beacon network. Every ship, every station, every colony needs to know what is coming across human space." Alarms began to sound. Admiral Kane stood in the command center of the flagship Resolute, studying the tactical display. Around her, dozens of officers worked in controlled urgency, coordinating the defense of humanity's home system. The display showed the approaching fleets in red, human forces in blue. The numbers were not encouraging. 3,000 ships, her tactical officer reported. Corvath, heavy cruisers, Vryn destroyers, and Teskar carriers. They are maintaining formation and will reach the outer system in 6 hours. Kane nodded slowly. She had expected something like this. The Corvath had been humiliated. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength. Some species would learn caution. Others would see only a threat that needed to be eliminated before it grew stronger. Status of the solar defense grid. Online and ready. All platforms responding. Moon bases are at full alert. Planetary shields are charging. Kane turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to the Unified Defense Command on Earth. Request authorization for full defensive protocols." The response came back within minutes. 2 words that changed everything. Authorization granted. Kane felt the weight of those words. For 70 years, humanity had restrained itself, had hidden its capabilities, had chosen peace even when challenged. But there were limits to patience, limits to restraint. "Activate all defensive systems," she ordered. "Release the weapons locks. And send a general call to all carrier groups in the outer system. I want them in position within 3 hours." The defense of Earth was about to begin. The Allied fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Admiral Vrex of the Corvath commanded the operation from his flagship. Beside his holographic form stood representatives of the Vryn and Teskar fleets, each commanding their own forces but coordinating for this assault. "Initial scans show minimal human presence," Vrex's tactical officer reported. "A few monitoring stations. Some mining operations on the outer planets. No significant fleet concentration." Vrex felt satisfaction pulse through his crystalline structure. "They are unprepared. We will crush them quickly and present the Council with a fait accompli. By the time they protest, Earth will be under Allied control." The Vryn commander, a scaled being named Dresh, hissed agreement. "Our intelligence suggests their fleet is scattered across multiple colonies. They cannot recall enough ships in time to mount a proper defense." "Then we advance," Vrex declared. "All ships proceed toward Earth at maximum speed. Weapons free." The massive fleet began to move. 3,000 ships sliding through space like a tidal wave of destruction. They had numbers. They had firepower. They had confidence. What they did not have was accurate intelligence about what humanity had built in its own solar system over the past 78 years. The first indication that something was wrong came when they reached Jupiter's orbit. Sensors detected movement. Thousands of points of light appearing around the gas giant's many moons. "What are those?" Dresh demanded. "Unknown. They appear to be unmanned platforms. Small, maybe weapons installations." Vrex studied the tactical display. The platforms were not firing. They were just sitting there, thousands of them, creating a cloud of sensor contacts that made it difficult to read the space beyond. "Defensive grid," he concluded. "Primitive, but potentially irritating. Have our point ships destroy them as we pass." The leading edge of the fleet opened fire. Energy weapons and missiles streaked toward the nearest platforms. But before the weapons could impact, the platforms moved, not away, toward each other. They were forming patterns. "They are repositioning," the tactical officer said, confusion evident in his voice. "But I cannot predict where they are going. The movement algorithms are unlike anything in our databases." That was when the platforms opened fire, not at the Allied fleet. At each other's targets. Each platform was networked with dozens of others, creating overlapping fields of fire that made it impossible to approach without exposing vulnerable angles. The leading Allied ships found themselves in a crossfire from multiple directions simultaneously. "Evasive action," Rex ordered. But the platforms had already calculated the evasive patterns. They had predicted where the ships would move and had positioned themselves. Accordingly, it was not about superior firepower. The platforms used weapons comparable to standard galactic technology. It was about coordination, about prediction, about understanding three-dimensional space in ways that made the Allied fleet's formations seem clumsy and obvious. Within 10 minutes, the Allied vanguard was in chaos. Ships collided with each other, trying to avoid the precisely calculated firing patterns. No one had been destroyed yet, but the perfect formation was broken. "Pull back and regroup," Rex ordered, crystalline structure flickering with frustration. "They are using automated defenses. Once we understand the patterns, we can counter them." But the platforms did not follow predictable patterns. They adapted in real time, shifting their behaviors based on how the Allied fleet responded. It was as if they were learning. "Admiral," the tactical officer said urgently, "we are detecting human ships. 6 carrier groups. They are positioned throughout the inner system." They were hiding in the sensor shadow created by the defensive platforms. Rex felt something cold settle in his structure. 6 carrier groups. And they had been waiting. This was not a surprise defense. This was a prepared ambush. Admiral Kane watched from the Resolute as the Allied fleet struggled with the defensive grid. Everything was going according to plan. The platforms were doing exactly what they had been designed to do: break up the enemy formation and force them into predictable response patterns. "All carriers, launch fighters," she ordered. "Begin pattern Theta 7. Hundreds of human fighters launched from the carriers. Small, fast ships that could slip through the defensive grid without triggering it. They formed up in squadrons and began their approach toward the Allied fleet. But they did not attack. They just positioned themselves around the fleet, creating a net that made it impossible for the larger ships to maneuver without risking collision. Then the human capital ships began to move. They did not charge forward like traditional warships. They moved like chess pieces, each one taking a position that supported the others. Overlapping fields of fire, mutual defense zones. Every ship covering another's weakness. Dresh watched the human ships move into position and felt his scales ripple with unease. They fight like a single organism, as if one mind controls all of them. "Not one mind," said the Teskar commander, a being of living gas contained in a specialized suit. "One strategy. They have calculated our responses before we make them. They are not reacting to us. They are executing a plan that accounts for everything we might do." Rex refused to accept this. "We still outnumber them 10-1. Numbers will prevail. All ships, full assault. Overwhelm them with sheer firepower." The Allied fleet charged forward, and that was when humanity stopped restraining itself. The defensive platforms did not just fire. They fired in synchronized patterns that created waves of destruction moving through space in calculated geometries. The human fighters did not dogfight. They executed precision strikes on specific subsystems, targeting engines, weapons, and shields in an order that left each ship progressively more vulnerable, and the human capital ships did not trade fire with their opponents. They moved through the Allied formation like surgeons, each attack calculated to create maximum disruption with minimal energy expenditure. They aimed for command ships, communication hubs, formation leaders. Every shot struck exactly where it needed to for maximum strategic effect. Within 2 hours, the battle had turned into a rout. Allied ships were colliding with each other. Communication networks were jammed or destroyed. Formations had dissolved into scattered clusters of vessels. Trying desperately to coordinate, the humans had not destroyed more than 100 ships, but they had disabled over 800. Crews sat in life support bubbles, watching as their weapons refused to fire and their engines refused to respond. All around them, human ships moved with mechanical precision, never wasting a shot, never taking an unnecessary risk. Executing a battle plan that had accounted for every variable, Vrex sat in his darkened command center, his crystalline structure barely glowing. How? How are they doing this? His tactical officer provided the answer he did not want to hear. They are fighting like they already know what we will do. Every time we change tactics, they have already positioned themselves to counter it. It is as if they have run this battle 1,000 times already. They had. In simulations, against models of Korvath, Vryn, and Teskar tactical doctrines. The human military had spent 70 years studying galactic warfare and running endless scenarios. They had seen every tactic, every formation, every strategic approach that these species might use. This was not a battle. This was the execution of a solution to a problem humanity had already solved. Admiral. Kane sent a final message on all frequencies. Allied fleet, you have 3 options. Surrender, and your crews will be treated well. Withdraw, and you will not be pursued. Or continue fighting and learn what human weapons look like when we stop trying to disable you gently. Across the Allied fleet, commanders looked at their disabled ships, their scattered formations, their ineffective weapons. They had come to conquer Earth. Instead, they had been systematically dismantled by a force they had thought primitive. One by one, they began to surrender. Kane watched the tactical display as red markers turned yellow, indicating ships that had powered down their weapons and accepted terms. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only the weight of what humanity had just revealed to the galaxy. They had shown mercy to the Korvath, but mercy had been interpreted as weakness. So now, the galaxy would learn the truth. When humanity chose restraint, it was a choice, not a limitation, and choices could always be unmade. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so silent. Every representative sat in their designated position, but none spoke. They all watched the holographic display at the center of the room, where Earth orbit was visible in perfect detail. Surrounding the planet were over 2,000 disabled warships. Korvath, Vryn, and Teskar vessels, all intact, all with living crews, all completely powerless. Human ships moved among them like caretakers, providing supplies and ensuring life support remained stable. Not a single ship had been destroyed in the battle. Human casualties numbered exactly 0. Allied casualties numbered exactly 0. It was the most one-sided military engagement in recorded galactic history, and that terrified the Council more than any massacre would have. The magistrate finally spoke. Bring in the human delegation. Marcus Webb walked into the chamber alongside Admiral Kane. Neither looked triumphant. If anything, they appeared tired. Behind them came Dr. Rebecca Stone, and a man the Council had not seen before. He wore a simple military uniform with few decorations, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had commanded in actual combat. This is General David Torres, Marcus said by way of introduction. He has spent his career studying galactic warfare and developing response protocols. He requested permission to address the Council. The magistrate gestured for the humans to approach. They descended into the gravity well at the chamber's center. Torres stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was level and professional, carrying the tone of someone presenting a briefing rather than a threat. I have studied every major conflict in recorded galactic history, he began. Over 3,000 battles spanning 4,000 years. I have analyzed tactics, strategies, logistics, and outcomes. I have built models of how each species approaches warfare. He activated a holographic display that showed battle after battle playing out in accelerated time. You fight with honor. You follow established rules of engagement. You have clear objectives, and you stop when those objectives are achieved. Or when casualties reach levels your cultures find unacceptable. Your wars are limited, purposeful, rational. The display shifted to show human history. Torres did not flinch from what it revealed. Humanity learned a different kind of war. We learned total war. We learned that if conflict cannot be avoided, you commit everything to it. Every resource, every advantage. You do not stop until your enemy has absolutely no capacity to continue fighting. Only then do you show mercy, because mercy from a position of overwhelming strength actually means something. Vex spoke from his position in the lower rings. His crystalline structure was still dim from shame. You said you have run simulations against every major power. Is that true? Yes. We have run over 10,000 scenarios against each of the 40 largest military powers in the galaxy. Different situations, different force compositions, different objectives. Torres met Vex's gaze directly. We have never lost a simulation. Not once. A murmur ran through the chamber. The implications were staggering. How is that possible? Demanded the Dreth representative. Some of these powers have existed for thousands of years. They have resources that dwarf yours. Experience you cannot match, because we approach the problem differently, Torres replied. You see warfare as an extension of politics, a tool to achieve specific goals. You calculate acceptable losses and fight within those parameters. He brought up new displays showing human strategic thinking. We see warfare as a mathematical problem to be solved. What is the most efficient path to victory? What resources are required? What patterns can be predicted and exploited? We treat it like engineering, like logistics, like any other complex system that can be analyzed and optimized. Kane stepped forward. When the Allied fleet attacked Earth, they did not encounter humanity defending desperately. They encountered the solution to a problem we had already solved. We knew how Corvath fleets respond to ambush. We knew Vryn tactical doctrine. We knew Teskar communication protocols. So we created conditions that exploited every weakness in those approaches. You manipulated us, Vrex said bitterly. He had been brought to the council to testify about the battle. You made us think we had numerical superiority. You let us commit to an assault that you had already countered before we even arrived. Yes, Kane agreed simply. That is what warfare means to humans. It is not about courage or honor or strength. It is about information, positioning, and execution. We had better information. We took better positions. We executed more efficiently. The magistrate's tendrils curled tightly. Then why peace? If you are this capable, why not conquer? Why not expand? Why hide your strength for 70 years? Marcus spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. Because being good at something does not mean you should do it. We are excellent at warfare. We have refined it over thousands of years of practice. We have industrialized it, mathematized it, perfected it, and that perfection almost destroyed us. He looked up at the assembled species. 400 years ago, we stood on the edge of extinction. We had weapons that could end our biosphere. We had strategies for total destruction. We had become so efficient at killing each other that we terrified ourselves. So we made a choice. We would be something else. We would be explorers, scientists, traders, friends. But we kept the knowledge, Torres added. We maintained our capabilities. We just hoped we would never need them again. We joined the galactic community, praying that you had found better ways, that we could finally put down the burden of being warriors. Rebecca Stone stepped forward. You laughed at us for fearing war. You thought it was weakness. You did not understand that some fears are wisdom. We fear war because we know exactly what we are capable of when we stop restraining ourselves. We have seen what we become when we commit fully to destruction. The chamber was silent. Species that had mocked humanity weeks ago now sat in uncomfortable contemplation. So what happens now? The magistrate asked quietly. You have defeated an alliance of 3 major powers. You have demonstrated capabilities that should not exist in a species so young. What do you want? Marcus took a breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. We want to share. Not our weapons. Never our weapons. But our defensive technology, our logistics systems, our coordination protocols, things that will make the galaxy safer. We will share the knowledge that prevents war rather than the knowledge that perfects it. He paused, then continued.
Ow.
And we have a request. We want to establish a military academy on Mars. We want to accept students from across the galaxy, not to teach them how to fight like humans, but to teach them why humans chose to stop fighting. The magistrate was quiet for a long moment. You would teach our warriors your strategic thinking? Your tactical approaches? No, Torres said firmly. We would teach them about the cost of war, about the mathematics of destruction, about what happens when warfare becomes too efficient. We would show them our history, all of it, the good and the terrible. We would let them see what happens when a species gets too good at killing, Kane added. We would teach them what humanity learned the hard way. That victory in battle is not the same as victory in peace. That the greatest strength is knowing when not to use your power. That some capabilities should exist only as deterrents, never as tools. The council deliberated for 3 days. Species debated whether to accept the human proposal or demand restrictions on human military capabilities. Some argued for preemptive action against Earth before humanity grew stronger. Others recognized that such action would likely trigger exactly the response they feared. In the end, wisdom prevailed over pride. The magistrate announced the council's decision. We accept your terms. You will share defensive technology with council members. You will establish your academy. And in return, Earth agrees to participate fully in council security operations and to help maintain galactic peace. Marcus bowed slightly. Agreed. But there is one additional condition, the magistrate added. You will tell us immediately if any species begins to develop the kind of warfare you practice. We have seen what you can do. We do not wish to see others follow the same path. That is acceptable, Marcus replied. We have no desire to see another species learn what we learned. The cost is too high. 5 years later, the Mars Military Academy opened its doors. The facility was built into the red planet's surface, surrounded by memorials listing every human life lost in wars throughout history. The architecture was deliberately somber. This was not a place of celebration. It was a place of remembrance. Lieutenant Commander James Morrison stood at the entrance, now serving as an instructor. He watched the first class of cadets arrive. Korvath, Dreth, Vryn, Teskar, and dozens of other species, all coming to learn from humanity's darkest chapter. A young Korvath cadet approached him. Her crystalline structure was bright with youth and curiosity. Commander Morrison, I have read that humans were once very proud of their military history, that you celebrated your victories. Why build this academy like a memorial? Morrison considered the question carefully. Because we learned something important. Being good at war is not an achievement. It is a tragedy. Every advancement in warfare represents lives lost. Every tactical improvement came from studying failures that cost people everything. He led the cadet toward the main hall, where the walls were covered in images from human history, battles, weapons, soldiers, but also the aftermath. The destroyed cities, the refugees, the graves. Well, we teach you strategy not so you can win battles, Morrison continued, but so you can understand how battles start. We teach you tactics not so you can defeat enemies, but so you can recognize when someone is preparing for war. We teach you logistics not to move armies, but to move humanitarian aid more effectively. They stopped before a memorial listing the dead from the First World War. 20 million names carved into black stone.
How did you stop?
The cadet asked quietly. How did humanity step back from being warriors? Morrison looked at the names. Some were his ancestors. By remembering. Every time we wanted to reach for old answers, we remembered what they cost us. Every time we wanted to solve problems with force, we remembered this. He gestured to the memorial, and we asked ourselves, is there another way? And if there is not, then we remember that we have the capability. We remember that we can defend ourselves if necessary. But we also remember why we pray it never becomes necessary. Because the greatest strength is not in winning battles. It is in preventing them. The cadet absorbed this. Then she asked one more question. Do you think the galaxy learned anything from what happened at Earth? Morrison smiled slightly. They learned that humanity is dangerous. That is important. But I hope they also learned something else. That dangerous species can choose peace. That strength can serve defense rather than conquest. That the galaxy does not have to be a place where power determines right. He looked out at the Martian landscape, where other cadets were arriving. Species that had been enemies weeks ago, now walking together toward education. The galaxy laughed at humans for fearing war. They thought we were weak. Now they understand. We feared it because we knew exactly how good we were at it. And that fear, that wisdom, might be the most important thing we can share. The cadet bowed in the Korvath manner. Thank you, Commander. I think I understand. Morrison watched her join the other cadets. Perhaps the galaxy would learn. Perhaps humanity's greatest contribution would not be technology or strategy, but the hard-won wisdom that some capabilities were best left unused. The galaxy had laughed. Then they had learned. Now, perhaps they would remember. And in remembering, they would choose a different path than humanity had walked. They would choose it with full knowledge of the alternative, with understanding of what efficiency in warfare actually meant. With wisdom purchased at the price of 20 million names on Blackstone, the greatest victory, Morrison thought, was not the one at Earth's orbit. It was this. Students from across the galaxy coming to learn. Why wars should be prevented rather than perfected. Humanity had shown the galaxy its strength. Now they would teach them its restraint, and that, finally, was something worth celebrating.